Thanks all of you for coming out. It's Environment Canada that reports on the weather, so that's the federal government. If you've walked across the street today, it has nothing to do with the provincial government. Brian and Colin, who were up here earlier speaking about the student union and the work that they were doing and creating a legacy for student unions, I want to congratulate you on your thoughtfulness. I'm grateful that you didn't do that before you left, because they were protesting me last week down on Main Street here, and I'm afraid if they'd known some of your tricks, what might have happened to me. Chris, your words about the startup in this community couldn't ring louder and truer. I believe we are on the cusp of exciting things happening. I get an opportunity to meet so many young, not only Nova Scotians, but young people who come to this province, mostly for education, who want to control their own destiny, who want to create their own opportunity, and we need to make sure that that environment in this province is there for them so that they can create that opportunity right here in Nova Scotia. Michael and Matthew, wow, I couldn't help but look at that. My wife works in a nursing home. I know a number of people who are Speaker of our House who's in a wheelchair, a number of Nova Scotians. Part of my speech will talk about someone who's in a wheelchair. That device, born out of the minds of young people in our post-secondary institutions, an application that can be applied to deal with a real-life issue in this province, is just the beginning of things that can happen across this province. So I want to thank the Chamber for that great initiative. Sarah and your company, thank you for highlighting some of the positive things that are happening across this province and the reason why we should be optimistic about our collective futures. It was about a year ago when I was here talking about the challenges facing our province, and you know as well as I know, there are very complex challenges facing this province, many of which have been born over decades. And there are no silver bullets or simple answers. You may hear from some people there are. Well, that's code for status quo. People who believe there are silver bullets or quick fixes to the challenges that have been built up over decades in this province are wanting the status quo. And that's not good enough. I was asked in 2009 to give a description of the first decade of this century. And I described it as the lost decade for this province. And I know the Chamber was patting governments on the back for balanced budgets. Well, the federal government was writing checks at a time that allowed the province to continue to balance the budget without addressing the structural problems inside of this province. Valerie spoke about the challenges that we faced in healthcare. We could have done, like every other government has done in our history, ignored the issue that was put before our government because it was a difficult conversation that had to happen. When we came to government in October of 2013, the person that registers your car in this province did not have the right to strike. Yet the person that cared for your ailing family member or your aging parent had the right to strike. Time after time, our province was brought to the brink of disruption in the healthcare services because governments were unwilling to deal with the structural challenges in the delivery of healthcare. What could be more essential than the delivery of healthcare to the people of this province? Yes, we need to respect the rights of workers in collective bargaining process, but that can happen. We've laid out a very thoughtful presentation that will reduce the number of collective agreements from 53 to 4. And there isn't a single government in our future of any political stripe that will undo that piece of legislation, because it's fair to workers, it's fair to the employer, and most of all, it's fair to the patient. But in order to achieve that, we had to acknowledge the structure was not working. The Minister of Education unleashed, I believe, a report that will transform public education in our province. 19,000 Nova Scotians responded to the Freeman Report. They told us the structure of public education in the province of Nova Scotia is not working. Throwing more money at the problem doesn't fix the structure. We need to ensure that our service delivery model in public education responds to the needs of young Nova Scotians. I had the great fortune of being in a school just recently in South Queens. It's a new school built. The Minister of Education opened it about 6 months ago. I couldn't go. It's a school that has classrooms built around the library. The teacher does not have a home room. They move around. When you walk out around the librarian, you'll see display monitors on the wall. Every child in that school has an iPad, either bought by their parents, bought by somebody in the community, but every child in that school has an iPad. And they work in groups. You'll see them break out from the classroom. Odin just outside the classroom working on a monitor on a problem. You'll see them in the classroom. I walked into a classroom where the teacher had put up a math problem. There was a timer on one side of the screen, and on the other side of the screen it began to show 1, 2, 3. Out of a classroom of 20, it began to see the kids make the answers, and then it tallied it up. 17 out of 20 got it right. Each child knew whether they got the question right or wrong, but so did the teacher. They continued, they were learning in an environment that they wanted to learn into, that responded to their needs and desires as young Nova Scotians. I also went into the classroom where the English teacher was working, and there were no iPads. Pen and paper was there. And they were getting back to the basics, the foundation of what every young person needs to understand: literacy and numeracy, and the ability to be able to write and comprehend what is in front of them. If you look at the direction the public education is heading in this province, it is student-focused. When the minister spoke about public education, it was about our children. The decisions that we make will be made from the desk outward. Yes, there will be difficult conversations with our partners when it comes to delivering public education. But I want to tell you, I've never been more inspired than I am by the men and women who stand in front of our children day in and day out. They know the system is broken, they know the system needs to improve, and they want to be part of the solution, ensuring that the next generation of young Nova Scotians have the skills that will be required to compete in a future global economy here in Nova Scotia. The structure of economic development in this province has been broken for a very, very long time. Over the last decade, we've continued to spend more on economic development as the economy has continued to decline. It doesn't work. The model we've been using has failed us. But it means that we have to change, and we have to be prepared to accept part of the change. Businesses fail. And I'm sorry, I can't write a check to keep every business alive, and nor should I. But that has been our motto. That has been our economic development strategy. How can we build a war chest to get us through the difficult times? That doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We've been able to rely on our partners at NSBI to refocus them on trade and internal investment. We've seen some positive results from that. Our friends at Innovacor, startup investment, making sure that the startup community recognizes that their province and community is part of ensuring that they have some of that venture capital that we required in the early stages. We'll be releasing an RFP in the very near future, asking for venture capital companies to partner with us. We will have seed money. We want them to add to that, and we want the private sector to manage our venture capital fund. We do not have the skills internally to do that, in my view. It is specialized service, and we should be allowing the private sector and working with the private sector to ensure that that venture capital is here in our region so that those young, bright minds who want to control their own future see that happening here and see the supports and infrastructure here in our community. This coming spring's budget will be a difficult one. It will be more about what government won't be doing. We shouldn't be doing all the things that we are doing. Our ministers, our departments have been asked to go through what it is they do, what is their core business, and the things that don't belong in their core business, then we need to have an honest conversation about them to decide what to do. For too long, the structure of government of all political stripes has been to create a program, ignore it, leave it, and then create another one without doing any analysis of whether we have achieved our objectives or not. That doesn't work. Look at the outcry that our government received when we canceled the GRR, the Graduate Retention Rebate Program. Every stat proved it wasn't working. It was $50 million that we were giving to university graduates who actually had a job in this province. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that it was a benefit to them. I don't want to dismiss that, because it was. But it wasn't what the program was built for. The program was built to retain university graduates, not to reward the ones who got jobs. It was built to provide more opportunity. It's why we announced the Graduate to Opportunities program to work with the private sector, to take those precious public dollars that we have to help support a new opportunity for a university grad or community college graduate and after their first year of graduation. It's about trying to do the things and achieve the things that we believe in. But it means that those of us who are given the privilege to govern have to make decisions, and sometimes they're not popular. And what is required for those of you that know that that's the right decision, to speak up and be heard. It's absolutely critical that we as a government ensure that we are getting the objectives out of the money we are spending on behalf of all Nova Scotians. I want to say how grateful I am to the men and women who work on behalf of all of us in the public service. I have been impressed day in and day out at the work that they do. But our organization is no different than any other organization. There are challenges at times. Thrilled more recently to announce that Catherine Brewer is the new clerk of the Executive Council, longtime civil servant, worked both federally and provincially, worked across jurisdictional return, come to guide and lead our public service. Many of you know that when I became Premier, I asked Bernie Miller to join me. Bernie took a huge pay cut. I keep telling him that. That's his part of public service, to come and work on behalf of our citizens to help us drive priorities and planning. More recently, I announced George McClellan is coming to join us as Deputy Minister of Finance to bring with us a public sector view of delivering a financial outlook for this province. It's different. It's a different way of delivering government. It's not a judgment, or it's not condemnation of anyone who has been in public service in this province, but I needed a certain skill set. And if I couldn't find it, I was going to go get it. In the coming weeks, I'm going to announce the hiring of a new deputy minister from the private sector. And their sole focus, their only job, will be regulatory review and reform. It's my hope. It's not my hope. It's my desire, and I know it'll happen, that our sister province, New Brunswick, will join us in this journey. From the Quebec border to the Atlantic Ocean, we will have the most progressive regulatory environment in the entire country. And it will be led by the private sector through a private sector lens. There are tremendous opportunities in our region, but we have to recognize, no matter how well the economy is doing and going to improve, we can't shy away from making the structural changes that are required to move this province forward. Success always demands a greater effort of those of us in government and those of us outside of government. We need to ensure that we stay focused on what is our objective. I always say there are two types of people in our province, those that see the glass half empty and those that see it half full. The group that see it half empty are the opposition, of course. I mean, I remember what that was like. It wasn't all that long ago. And those that see it half full. You've all seen what's happened globally with oil prices. Well, BP and Shell see the glass half full in Nova Scotia. As they're making changes in their global operation, the one place they're not changing is off the coast of Nova Scotia, because they believe in the long-term game. They understand this is where things are happening. Our province, believe it or not, led our country in export growth last year. Across all sectors, not just one, we led the country in export growth. That's the private sector driving exports out of this province. That's the glass half full. When I stood before you last year, I spoke about Wadia and Colin, who have taken on and have agreed to take on the challenge of dealing with the nominee program with the federal government. I'm pleased to tell you that they've had a 50% increase in the nominees for the province of Nova Scotia in 1 year. That's through their hard work and commitment to the people of this province, and our government supports them 100%. And I want to tell you what Wadia will tell you. It's not good enough. We need to do more. We need to grow our population. We've had an increase, quite frankly, in the population of Nova Scotia. It's important to acknowledge that. But we need to grow the population more. We need to make sure that marginalized Nova Scotians see themselves as an opportunity in the workplaces across this province. The Aboriginal community, the African Nova Scotians need to identify that they belong in every workplace across this province. We cannot afford to leave one single young Nova Scotian behind if we believe that we can build an economy that reflects who we are. Wadia, continue your great work on behalf of all of us. I want to acknowledge the Port of Halifax and St. Mary's University, who recently entered into a partnership for a new international student internship program. That's great private sector leadership. They're providing new opportunity for international students to get a first work term here in our province. That's great leadership. That's looking at the glass half full. Last spring, John Risley introduced me to a guy by the name of Victor Chu, my office here in Halifax. And Victor and I hit it off. He invited me to speak at the Summer Davos Conference in Tianjin. He brought together business leaders in Hong Kong for me to have an opportunity to speak to him. And as I was leaving, he said, you know, I want to do something for Nova Scotia. You've got a great part of the world. Your universities, education, your beautiful landscape, of course your lobster. He said, I want to do something, and during that conversation we didn't kind of land on exactly what that was. Over the number of months, continued to chat. Senior Deputy Minister spoke with Victor, and we landed on a $50 million equity fund. And I went to London recently to settle that agreement with Victor. It's a $50 million equity fund that he wants to invest in Nova Scotia companies. Yes, of course he wants to make money. That's what he should do. But he sees an opportunity to provide an export market in Japan and in Asia for us, for our companies. It's the first fund that he has in Canada. He didn't choose Toronto. He didn't choose Vancouver. He didn't choose Edmonton. He chose Nova Scotia. Because through his eyes, this province, the glass in this province, is half full. We've seen tremendous positive things happening across our province. We need to tell our story. People believe in this province. I've had the good fortune of representing you in many parts. Our proximity to London and to New York are positive attributes that we need to market and capitalize on. We need to remember our relationship with New England, the importance of building that partnership, whether it's from energy or whether it's from goods and services, whether it's from our lobster, or whether it's, quite frankly, just because they're family. Generations of our respective families went to New England to start their own lives. We need to continue to work with the positive infrastructure, transportation infrastructure that we have to map out our destiny when it comes to shipping and receiving and moving goods and services in and out of Canada. There's no other province can talk about having the port like we do, or an airport like we do, or rail that will get goods and services in the central U.S. faster than us. We need to tell our story. And I'm going to tell you, this may surprise some of you, but when a politician tells a story, not everybody believes it. You need to be part of the storytelling. We need to hear about your successes. We need to hear about what's worked for you. And we need to build on those successes. Leave you with a final thought. One of the things that I spoke about last year was cultural change and attitude. And we need work to do on all of that. Everyone knows that changes are coming, but they want it to affect everyone else but them. If I had $1 for every time someone has told me to be bold in the last year, we would be in surplus and well on our way to paying down the debt. But when I suggest to them that my boldness is going to impact on them, we have a very different conversation. We as a government have a direction and a vision of where we're going to take this province. And it's structural change. It's one ensuring that we are prepared to weather any future challenges that we may have, but it's preparing an infrastructure that will allow us to capitalize on the opportunities that come out of every downturn, so that all of us can share in that success. Our government will not sign, and I've said this many places and I'll say it again, I will not agree to any agreements, collective agreements, that our government cannot afford to pay today and now. I will not push it out beyond the next election. I'll suffer the consequences of a campaign, but we will not force a future government or future generation of Nova Scotia to deal with the problem that is on our doorstep today. Our agreements will reflect our ability to pay. And the reason that is so critical, simply it's the right thing to do, but more importantly, that as we get the upturn and as we begin to see positive signs in the economy to grow, we need that growth to be able to invest in opportunities that all of us can gain from, that all of us can grow from. We cannot be in a position where that growth has been eaten up by commitments we have already made in contracts across this province. Many of you may not, or you may know, I have a great love and appreciation for Special Olympics and the L'Arche community. I had the good fortune of building a number of friendship with extraordinary Nova Scotians through the Special Olympics, through my constituency at home, and I've been asked since being a leader to go to their annual meeting, and I was there more recently. And I got a picture with the basketball team, and there was a young man named Billy. And the photographer was snapping pictures, and I was doing what the politician does, which is just continue to look straight ahead at the grin as much as I could. And after about 3 pictures, Billy says, "Stop. You got to do it again. I wasn't smiling and I wasn't looking at you, and it's the Premier's fault. I said, Billy, I've heard that so many times in the last 2 years. Everything can't be my fault. But I also received a call from a friend of mine asking me to visit one of the L'Arche communities last spring. And I stopped in on my way down the valley home. And this was in the L'Arche community in Wolfville, and Keith Irving, I don't know if Keith is here, Keith and I visited in Kings South, and I actually may have been on that day on my own, and Keith and I went in back a few days later. I walked in the front door, and I was greeted by a smile that if you were to put a dollar figure on it, I don't know how you would. It was a Magic Johnson kind of smile, and for those of you who are basketball fans, Magic was a tremendous basketball player, but that smile is what got him all those endorsements. I was greeted by this smile, and I knew I'd met the smile before. And the smile's name is Christine, but I wasn't sure where I had met her, but I knew that I had met her because of the way I had felt. So I went and I did the tour of the facility, showing me in the back where they were dividing up goods that they were selling out. There was some baking going on. They took me down the basement where people were working, building candles. And then I went upstairs. And I sat in the boardroom, and they were telling me about their plans to build a new L'Arche community in Wolfville, a new L'Arche facility. And it was about a $2.4 million project, and they had raised about 1.8. And they were well on their way to achieving their objective. And during the presentation, they said to me, I said, what inspired this? And they said, Christine, that smile that I met coming through the door. And I said, well, explain. They said, well, she came to work one day and she said, I can't participate fully in what goes on in our community. See, Christine's in a wheelchair. She couldn't go downstairs and she couldn't go upstairs. And she thought it was unfair. And so did all other members of the L'Arche community. So they embarked on this great journey together. So I said, I want to go speak to Christine. So down I go. And we go into a room, and I sit at the table. I said, Christine, tell me how that felt. And she looked at me like any spouse would look at their husband when you ask a stupid question. But gratefully, she didn't respond the way my spouse would when I asked a stupid question. She went on to tell me what a difference it will make in the lives of people with mobility challenges, and what a difference it would make in the lives of those who are mobile to be able to interact together. So I tell you this story because there is an end to it and it's important for all of you. So I said to her, that's going to be some nice for you when the new facility gets built. And she said, well, it'll be nice for everybody. The story is, Christine is no longer in the L'Arche community. She did what she wanted to do, what she aspired to do, which was go to work and live on her own. But she continues to respond to that project, even though she will not be the beneficiary of it, because our collective community will be the beneficiary of it. There's a story in that for all of us. There's a story in the sincerity and beauty of Christine and Billy for all of us to recognize together we build a stronger province and a stronger community, that the individual success should be celebrated, and that the individual success will build on the collective success. And the individual success should never trump the collective success. It should be part of it. We as a province have a golden opportunity. I can assure you, our government is going to focus on structural change for the way we deliver services to the people of this province. We need you to help us continue to move forward so that we can all build on the individual success so that the collective success will be what each and every one of us want it to be. Thank you for letting me be here today.